All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Balanced Scorecard Institute webinar, the ultimate KPI cheat sheet. I'm David Wilsey, the Chief Operating Officer for the Balanced Scorecard Institute and pump and KPI trainer and consultant. I've been now teaching or consulting performance measurement, KPIs, or Balanced Scorecard related topics for about 10 years. I'm working out of the BSI headquarters here in Cary, North Carolina in the US. Thank you all for attending. I believe registration pegged out at almost 600 this week, so clearly there is a lot of interest out there in KPIs, or at least in the cheat sheet version. Just so you know, a recording of this webinar will be posted on our website in the next few days. As you know, this webinar is part of the rollout of our new KPI Professional Certification Program. Many of you might already be familiar with our Balanced Scorecard Professional Certification Program. This new program, also offered in association with the George Washington University College of Professional Studies and including Stacey Barr's PUMP program, is a 5-day boot camp designed to help strategy and KPI practitioners learn how to build, deploy, and sustain KPIs in order to improve organizational strategy or operational performance. Anyone that attends this webinar will be entitled to a discount for our KPI bootcamp in the US before the end of the year. Just use the discount code cheat sheet without the quotes on your registration form or contact us directly. The learning objectives for today's webinar include that you will be able to develop introductory level understanding related to the challenges that come with KPI development and implementation, key tips to overcoming the most common problems, benefits of good KPIs, and keys to successful execution and sustainment. Most of this webinar is organized around a few cheat sheet tips designed to help you overcome some of the common challenges faced by KPI professionals. For our international friends that might not be familiar with the cheat sheet concept, this phrase refers to a note that might be shared between students that are cheating on an exam or a test. The irony here is that while the cheat sheet might have all the answers written on it for the exam, the students obviously can't learn everything they need to know from it. So similarly today, we can't teach our entire 5-day program in 45 minutes, but we can share some foundational recommendations for you to get started with. All right, so let's start with some of the foundations. What do we mean by a KPI? A KPI is an indicator of progress towards a desirable outcome. KPI and performance measurement development is a discipline that involves articulating what an organization is trying to accomplish and then identifying the most meaningful and useful indicators of success. KPIs are an important part of any strategic management system, as they are critical to assessing the effectiveness of the strategy implementation. They also help with analysis of the gap between actual and targeted performance, and with measurement of organizational effectiveness and operational efficiency. Operational measures, project measures, risk measures, and others help provide an early warning system throughout the organization to help improve performance. KPIs provide insight into whether strategies are working, whether programs and projects and services are helping the organization move forward. KPIs focus employees' attention on what matters most to success and allows for the measurement of accomplishments. Some KPIs are literally measurements where you're counting something, and others are more indirect indicators. But the important thing is that they provide objective evidence of progress towards achieving a strategic objective or goal. So not all measures are KPIs. Good KPIs also inform better decision making by helping us understand whether the actions we are taking are making a difference or not. And all good measurements offer a comparison. In other words, a single data point doesn't really tell you what you want to know. If our organization has, say, 9 complaints this month, I don't know if that's good or bad without making a comparison. If we average If we average 2 complaints per month, now 9 sounds pretty bad. If we average 100 per month, then that 9 sounds like an improvement. Finally, KPIs come in all different types depending on what you're trying to accomplish, and can indicate improvements in efficiency, effectiveness, time, quality, timeliness, and the other things that you can see there on your screen. All right, before we go on, let's try a quick poll question. Most leaders and managers agree that the use of KPIs, or at least measurement in general, is a foundational element of good management. But unfortunately, many seem to run into the same challenges over and over, such as finding meaningful measures and getting true buy-in to performance measurement and aligning measures to strategy and using measures to drive improvement. So which one of these common challenges has your organization faced? Let me see if I can make this work. All right, so on your screen, you should see 5 options. People don't understand or value performance. Our strategy is very hard and often, sorry, it's hard to see on my screen. But you see the 5 options. Pick the one that you have the most challenge with. You don't know what to measure. Our measures don't align with strategy. We don't do anything with our data afterwards. So which one do you struggle with the most? Very interesting. We seem to have a lot of issues with culture. People don't understand and value performance measurement. It looks like several of them. It looks like we have actually all of these are challenges that people do face. Okay, let's say another minute or so, and then I'll close and show you the results. All right, it looks like most of us have already voted. If you haven't voted, I'll give you about another 5 seconds. All right, very good. So it looks like 38% of you indicated that the biggest challenge is that people don't understand and value performance measurement. That's a very common problem that we run into. It's a challenge that is very difficult to get to overcome. You really do have to work on establishing the right culture. In the pump model, step 1 is dedicated to trying to help people understand what performance measurement is about and establishing the right culture, making sure that people understand where you currently stand as an organization, what you're good at, what you're not good at, so that you know how to move forward as an organization from a performance measurement and KPI standpoint. We also had some folks, the next big, that we don't know what to measure. Of course, that's always a challenge. Usually that's a strategy issue, not as much of a measurement issue. Can we articulate what we're trying to accomplish in a way that's measurable? We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Our measures don't align with strategy. Again, that's a strategy issue oftentimes. And then 15% say we don't do anything with the data afterwards. We'll talk a little bit later about performance reporting and sharing and how to use performance information. And then finally, our strategy is very hard and often. I'm sorry that it's cut off on my screen, but it's hard. It's let's see. There we go. It's impossible. Our strategy is very hard and often impossible to measure. Again, that's about articulating our goals in a way that in a more measurable, in a way that's more easy to measure. All right. So as I said a minute ago, this webinar is organized around these cheat sheet tips. And when I created this, I didn't realize I was going to trip over the cheat sheet phrase for the next hour. So just bear with me. Okay, so our first cheat sheet tip is that it's probably the most important one in terms of organizational success. The first tip is that strategy comes first. A training student recently told me his organization is struggling to implement KPIs for brand equity, customer engagement, and a few others, because they believe the measures didn't really apply to their company. I asked him why they were implementing those measures, if they didn't seem to apply, and he said they had found them in a book. Um, well, they had no real strategy or goals of any sort, and yet somehow he thought they had a measurement problem. So, KPIs found in a book of measures don't necessarily mean anything in relation to your strategy. If you don't have strategy and you can't articulate that in a way that people understand, then it's really way too early for KPIs. Another client we worked with was in the nonprofit sector. They were dedicated to fighting child poverty. For years, they had done a very good job of tracking the situation for children worldwide. They could tell you exactly what the situation was for a child in Botswana or Malaysia at any given time. They had tons of outcome-focused measures that they tracked that they were trying to influence. And then internally, they also had some operational measures, and they had some activity measures and a few output measures. The problem was that they lacked any kind of connection between what they were working on and their desired outcomes. They needed a set of KPIs that helped them understand if they were working on the right things. They needed a framework that connected the dots. This gets at the key question that most managers are trying to answer with their KPIs. Are the actions we are taking making a difference? All right, let's try another poll question. Does your organization have measures that connect organizational activities and outputs to desired outcomes? Okay, our three options: we do not use a strategy or measurement framework. We have some framework pieces with mixed results, and we use a strategy or measurement framework successfully. All right, right off the gate, out of the gate, it looks like the that middle ground result, as I expected. The middle ground is getting a majority of the votes. As we see in our classes and with the clients we work with, most organizations are really wrestling with this. They do have some of the pieces in place. Nobody's working in a vacuum, but they. Let me close this and I'll show you the results. We had 75% of you that have some of the pieces in place. We have 17% that have no strategy or measurement framework. So there's a lot of work left to do there. And then we have 8% that use a framework successfully. So bravo to those of you that are making progress in this area. Like I was saying a minute ago, there are often a lot of organizations, 75% of you that are wrestling with this. They have some of the pieces in place, but they haven't quite connected the dots in a way that is wildly successful the way they want. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. What do I mean by a strategic management system, first of all? A strategic management system is one that integrates strategy formulation and planning, strategy execution, and performance measurement and management. It systematically connects the dots between what you're working on and what you're trying to accomplish. And a good framework, any of them, there's lots of different frameworks out there. And any of the good ones should help you communicate the organization's vision, mission, and strategy so that people understand what you're trying to accomplish and so that employees can align day-to-day work to the mission and strategy, as well as prioritize programs and projects and services, etc., based on the strategic goals. And then finally, a good strategic framework provides the context you need to use KPIs and targets to measure progress and improve performance. Good KPIs can be designed within the context of any of the many strategy frameworks as long as the system is built conceptually from high strategic altitude down. What that means is that you want to start with the big picture questions first and slowly add granularity until you're talking about specific measures and actions. Okay, so mission and vision drive the high-level strategy of the organization, which might take the form of strategic themes or goals or something along those lines. Those goals are broken down into smaller chunks, which might be called strategic objectives or strategies. KPIs are typically designed at the objective level, but could be helpful at any level to help indicate progress towards a desirable outcome. And then finally, strategic initiatives and various actions should all be designed to help the organization achieve their strategic objectives. And otherwise, execute or implement your strategy. Now, there's a long history here, in terms of modern goal and objective setting. Lots of different models going all the way back to at least to the mid 50s when the management by objectives model became popular. Peter Drucker and all the folks that made this a really popular. This model has evolved over the years. In the 80s, you started to see the SMART model become more and more popular. It's very similar, but you actually create objectives using the SMART letters. And then very recently, we've seen a rise in popularity for OKRs, or objectives and key results. Again, it's a very similar model. It's popular, because Google used it, and they've had some success with it. But again, it's a model that's based very similarly on the management by objectives model. And then, of course, in our world, we have the Balanced Scorecard, which is a strategy execution, strategic planning framework to use to articulate what you're trying to accomplish and manage that. So, again, all of these are commonly used frameworks used to identify what you're trying to accomplish, articulate that, and then tie your KPIs, to your goals or objectives. We cover all of these in greater detail in the KPI program. All right, so our next cheat sheet tip is on the flip side of that first one, and that is that measurement is not only about strategy. Okay, there's more to it than just that. Measurement is an important tool for any management area. The same principles and process that are applied when developing strategic measures can also be used to increase focus and performance in other areas, such as evaluation of program effectiveness, or operational effectiveness, or project performance, or personnel capacities and skills, or risk management. The same logic applies to all of these areas. First, you articulate what you're trying to accomplish with a clearly measurable result. Then you find a sensory-specific indicator of that result. You implement and interpret your data using scientifically valid manners, and then you focus on process improvement to close the gap between your current performance and where you want to be. Now, this fundamental process remains consistent within the varying content of each area. In terms of program effectiveness, outputs could be mapped, to a series of intermediate outcomes to help understand exactly how a program is generating value. With KPIs developed to track each of the key outcomes as necessary. Operational effectiveness measures tend to focus on process efficiency and quality and timeliness and compliance and things like that. Project performance measures tend to initially focus on things like scope and budget and resource, schedule and risk, but ultimately can take on some of the same characteristics as the program effectiveness category. Now, so here's another look at these different ways of defining performance. We think of KPIs commonly within the strategic realm, and this shows a balanced scorecard set of perspectives, but any strategy model would be a good way of thinking about our KPIs. And then you've got program, product, service measures that focus on efficiency and output and timeliness and quality. And then you've got projects that are hopefully driving improvements in your performance, and you want to know that those projects are being implemented on time and on budget, things like that. And then you've got employee measures. You've got someone over in HR focusing on making sure we have the right capacities and making sure everybody has the right skills and things like that. Hopefully, all of this is being supported with our data and our analysis. So we're looking at all of these various measures throughout the system. We're connecting the dots, and then we're reporting and sharing that. Okay, so the sharing of this information could be happening publicly. A lot of our federal government organizations have to share their information publicly, but then most organizations are using this internally to make better decisions and make sure that people have what they need to make the right decisions and improve our performance. Now, risk management is handled a bit differently, in that potential risk factors can be identified during the strategy development phase. In this picture, risk factors are tied to things like high-level strategy, strategic initiatives, and strategic objectives. But the basic principles are the same regarding of the strategy model. Once potential risk factors are identified and assessed, key risk indicators can be developed for any of these potential risk factors that are determined to be a reasonable threat. Now, what is a key risk indicator? A key risk indicator is it's something that provides timely information about emerging risks. They're just like any of the KPIs you might develop, for strategy. Only they focus on these risk factors. You might develop them during the strategy discussions. They often measure trigger points that signal increasing risk exposure. For example, maybe I'm managing a nonprofit worldwide, and my food distribution strategy depends on the strength of the US dollar. I might have a key risk indicator tied to the price of the dollar with a red flag that's triggered if the dollar weakens below a particular point. At whatever point it's going to affect my strategy. So that's how you would use a risk indicator, a key risk indicator, to help you execute strategy. You should consider the purpose of measuring performance when selecting performance measures as the measures that will be most helpful for understanding, say, your budget situation or imposing control over a process or situation will be very different from those used to motivate or promote or celebrate. Of course, most of the true KPIs in your system will be focused on improving organizational performance or evaluating strategy effectiveness. All right, so the next KPI cheat sheet tip is to remember that KPI development is a process, and as with any process, it can be done poorly with poor results, or it can be systematically improved over time. I'm embarrassed to admit the first time I facilitated the development of performance measures with a client, I stood in front of a blank flip chart and asked them to brainstorm potential measures. It was my first consulting engagement as a junior associate, and the project lead had stepped out to take an emergency phone call. So even though I had a basic understanding of what KPIs are supposed to look like, I couldn't really help the client come up with anything other than project milestones like, complete the web redesign by August, or improvement initiatives like, we need to redesign the CRM process, or vague ideals like the customer loyalty. What I didn't understand at the time is that you need to use a deliberative process to develop KPIs based on the intended results of your strategy. And like any other process, KPI development requires continuous improvement, discipline, and focus to get better. We should never see KPI development as an hour of brainstorming at the end of an annual planning workshop. Measure development is a process, like I was saying, which means it can be done consistently and it can be improved over time. Performance measurement is really it's a feedback loop that links strategy, reporting, and continuous improvement together as an integrated system. It helps everyone in the organization focus on the right things and take the right actions to achieve, your vision and goals. Now, there are several tools and techniques used in the KPI professional program to help frame or understand performance. The measurement development methodology that we teach during days 2 and 3 of the program is the PUMP methodology that was developed by our friend and partner Stacey Barr. Some of the other tools we talk about in the course include the logic model, which is very popular in many governments and nonprofits, especially the cause and effect analysis or Ishikawa diagram. The process flow analysis, and then several others that are used that are helpful for analyzing project performance or risk analysis. Now, the PUMP method is a team-based process. It's got 8 very deliberate steps. In the first step, you learn how to help the organization understand what good measurement means and how to do it properly and develop the right culture. In reference to our poll a few minutes ago, this is a real challenge for a lot of organizations. In step 2, you learn how to translate strategy into clear, specific, and easily measurable results. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of seconds. You use the PUMP measurability tests and the PUMP results map, a couple of templates within that step. In step 3, you learn how to use the PUMP measure design template to design meaningful measures. In step 4, we talk about buy-in and how to generate excitement around strategy and around measurement. You learn a particular technique in that step. In step 5, we talk about why so many measures are never reported or used, and we use a measure definition technique to detail exactly what each of the measure includes and how that should be implemented. In step 6, we talk about why so many performance reports and dashboards are ignored. Why nobody's using the data. That was another one of the poll answers we had a minute ago. And we learn how to design a report in a way that makes them a lot more useful. In step 7, we talk about interpreting measures. Make sure you're not misinterpreting the measures the way so many people do. We learn a particular technique called an XMR chart. And then finally, step 8, we talk about reaching performance targets, where we focus on the process improvement steps needed to use the measurement to actually make improvements. Now, there's a lot of benefits to using a formal methodology like PUMP. It helps you be more disciplined, to help you make strategy measurable and easier to communicate. It helps you with selecting and designing measures that are more meaningful than brainstorming, like the challenge I had when I was standing in front of that blank flip chart. You're never going to get to good measures that way. You really do need the discipline of forcing people to go through each discipline step. Using discipline is good for buy-in. It helps you bring the measures to life more consistently. It helps create more actionable results. I think we've all probably been in that situation where you work in this office at a large company, you get a particular report once a month. It's just something that somebody feels like they're supposed to be. It's a report that everybody sends out and nobody reads. How do you with a disciplined process, you'll learn how to make that into more actionable. You'll learn a methodology within this process to learn how to interpret true signals in your measures, and then finally you'll learn how to convincingly hit targets and make measurement more about transformation than just about collecting data. All right, let's try one more poll question. Does your organization use a formal methodology for developing KPIs? Let's try this one. All right, similar to the last one, yes, we use a formal methodology. We use some formal methods with mixed results, and then no, we don't use a formal methodology. All right, very quickly, we've got, it looks like a majority of you do not use a formal methodology at all. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of you are standing in front of a blank flip chart or a whiteboard and just making it up. That's not surprising. It's actually not that common to find formal performance measurement methodologies. There's a lot of tools out there. All right, let's say maybe one more minute. It looks like most of you have voted. Yeah, it looks like almost all of you have voted. So I'm gonna go ahead and close. All right, so we had 54% who said no. We don't use a formal methodology. So if you're in that category, don't feel bad. There's a lot of you out there. We had 500 people register or so, and over half of you do not have a formal methodology. On the other hand, 33% are using some formal methods with mixed results, and then 13%, the proud few, the 13% who do use a formal methodology. I'd be curious to find out how successful you all have been with that. Very good, very interesting. All right, so the next cheat sheet tip is critical to getting off on the right foot in terms of measure design, and that is to articulate intended results using sensory-specific language. Okay, the first thing to talk about is why strategy is so hard to measure. Unfortunately, it's hard to measure. The key reason is that we like to write our goals and objectives using language like this. We want to leverage differentiating strategies to expedite collaborative value. Of course, I'm exaggerating with my overuse of consultant speak or fluff, as they like to say, but only a little. Strategy teams have a bad habit of writing strategy as vague, abstract ideals. And this might make it easier to develop consensus on the strategy team, but it makes life very difficult for those expected to execute that strategy or measure the results of that strategy. So one of the tricks in the pump methodology is as you pivot from strategy to measurement, it is critical that you articulate what this strategy actually looks like using concrete sensory-specific language that you can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. Studies have shown that concrete words are 2 to 3 times more memorable than abstractions. For example, if I told you all that as a result of our new purchasing initiative that I want a fleet of quiet, blue, 4-door, fuel-efficient cars, notice how concrete that language is. I imagine most of you would be, you're picturing something like this, or this, or this. Notice I'm avoiding the abstract language we typically use in strategy. Abstract language refers to concepts or vague ideals like sustainable, innovative, reliable, leadership, quality, effectiveness, leverage, efficiency, resilient, optimized, world-class, responsive. There's so many of those. There's a million of them. And they're notoriously difficult to measure without translation. Okay, so you have to translate that language at least into a result. If I state the result in abstract language, such as I want world-class, high-quality, great value, high-performing cars, I will likely get a myriad of results because everyone has a slightly different perception of what world-class means or high-quality even means. I bet some of you are thinking about a Ferrari. And others of you are maybe picturing a luxury sedan or maybe even a nice SUV. Notice how with the blue cars, not only did you understand better what I wanted, but I could very easily measure whether or not we were successful. A red car would have stood out like a sore thumb. Now, I've seen strategy teams shift from 100% agreement on vague ideals to diametric opposition on potential intended results. That indicates that their consensus around strategy was actually an illusion. Now, the good news is that this is very teachable, as I've seen KPI and pump practitioners make this shift in a matter of hours. So use language a 5th grader could understand to describe the result you're seeking, and more meaningful and useful performance measures will almost jump out at you. So the next cheat sheet tip is that it's not about the dashboard. Dashboard software is great when it's used to support a well-designed strategic management system. Unfortunately, many people are more interested in buying a flashy new tool than they are about understanding how they're performing. So KPIs are not about a dashboard. KPIs are about articulating what you're trying to accomplish, clearly communicating that, and then monitoring your progress towards those goals. A dashboard is the supporting tool. And too much emphasis on technology misses and often distracts us from the point. The goal here is that continuous improvement and to reduce the intangible uncertainty that we have with every important management decision we try to make. There are some very simple steps to improving your use of performance information. First, you want to structure reports around strategy. Make sure that at no point does the reader have the urge to shift the focus away from what you're trying to accomplish. Make sure your report is actionable. What that means is not just answering the basic question of what our current performance looks like, but also answering the deeper questions around why are you getting those results and what actions are recommended. Next, we recommend using a graph that signals. In the pump and the KPI course, we teach everyone how to use an XMR control chart in a way that guarantees that you won't misinterpret your data and start making unnecessary actions. Once you begin collecting data and enter the process improvement phase, make sure you continue to have a dialogue around performance. It's not helpful for one analyst in a cave somewhere in the basement of your building to know how well you're performing. The purpose of KPIs is to help leaders and managers to make more informed decisions, and that process is much more effective if it includes interactive dialogue. Another very important thing is to always remember that you cannot do everything at once. Even organizations with tons of resources have to prioritize and focus to be more effective. So once you begin to identify gaps in your performance, choose the more important 2 to 3 to focus on first. So our final cheat sheet tip is also an example of people missing the point. And that is that it's not about the KPIs. We have many clients who think this process begins and ends with the KPIs themselves. Unfortunately, some of those folks are simply trying to meet a reporting requirement or prepare for a single important meeting. I've worked with several federal government organizations that are mandated by law to report strategic performance information, and it seems like many of them view this as an inconvenience instead of an opportunity for improvement. Similarly, I've worked for several private corporations who view performance measurement and reporting as an opportunity, to bury their bosses with charts and graphs, to prove how much work we all do. But these approaches completely miss the point, and it misses the power of KPI development, which is that KPIs provide evidence to inform decision making and enable continuous improvement. Now, there's many reasons why measures don't always improve performance, such as when organizations choose initiatives and targets before they really think through their KPIs. Some will finish their strategic planning process and think they're finished, and then they never return back to manage performance. You do want to have some sort of a regular routine forum in which you talk about how you're performing and what are you doing to make things better. Some have a knee-jerk reaction to individual data points instead of learning to properly interpret their data, and some choose to judge employees, assuming that people are the cause of performance gaps rather than to focus on the process improvement and learning from their data. So that concludes our cheat sheet tips. If you'd like to dig a little deeper into any of these issues, please take a look at our new KPI professional bootcamp course. We will be in Washington, D.C. next month, and then in Atlanta, Georgia in November. Also in November, I will be teaching the course in Dubai. Don't forget that anyone that attends the webinar will be entitled to a discount in the U.S. before the end of the year. Just use the discount code cheat sheet. There we go. On your registration form, or contact us directly. Here's a high-level agenda for the KPI program. Day 1 is an introduction to the topic, as well as some coaching on how to create the right strategic context using various strategy and goal-setting models and culture to develop and use KPIs. Day 2 and 3 focus on the development of KPIs using the PUMP methodology. Days 4 and 5 focus on practical application and advanced topics. We use the same principles and methods to develop different types of measures, including risk and key risk indicators. Then we cover KPI alignment through the cascading process, and then develop and present application project presentations. All right, so it looks like we have a little bit of extra time. Does anybody have any questions? In your GoToWebinar panel, there is a section there for questions. All right, it looks like we've got a lot of questions about terminology. What is the difference between, say, a KPI and a measure and metrics and all some of that terminology that a lot of people get really caught up in? So let's talk about that for a second. We see a lot of angst on LinkedIn groups and other areas online about the specific terminology. And using language is consistent, or using language consistently is really important. So I understand that, but I've found that it's best to keep things simple. KPIs are the measures at any level that indicate progress towards something important strategically. I've never found it valuable to strictly differentiate between what's a KPI versus what's a measurement. Technically measures are something you're counting, and KPIs are more of an indicator. But to get too caught up in that doesn't really seem to be very helpful. Or the phrase metrics, for instance, we use that synonymously with measurements. Now, an index is a grouping of measures under one heading that is used as an indicator. But again, keep things simple. That's the key. What I want to know is, what am I trying to accomplish, and what indicators do I have that we are making something happen? Similarly, because of the strategy model we use, it isn't usually helpful to separate results indicators from key performance indicators the way some do. But again, there's a lot of models out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, it looks like we've got a couple of questions about cascading or creating alignment. It's also a good question, as we technically don't recommend that you cascade KPIs, literally. We recommend you cascade strategy no matter what model you're using. So if you have an objective or a strategy or a goal focused on, say, customer experience, the KPI at the organizational level will be an indicator that we as an organization are good at creating a good customer experience, in the aggregate. As you cascade that strategy down into the organization, different business units and departments will clarify what a good customer experience looks like for them and design and manage their own measurements. All right, we got a lot of questions about the program itself. Does the program focus on Balanced Scorecard? No. Both the PUMP program and the KPI Professional Certification program are very much independent of other programs. We try to address how to use the models and techniques in the context of any strategy framework. We have questions about the cost of the program, locations. Please visit the website at the bottom of the screen. And we'd be happy to talk, or you can contact us directly on the website, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about the program. The certification, let's see, it's a 5-day certification program. So to be certified, you sit through the 5-day program, you complete an application project in class, you do the presentation on Friday, there's a lot of discussion with the instructor about that, and then you have to pass an exam. The exam is online, it takes about an hour. Once you pass the exam, you'll be certified. Yes, Informa is our partner for the Dubai program. Will it be an agricultural focused program? No, it's a focused on KPI development in general, not on any particular vertical. We're finding it difficult to set outcome targets for our administrative staff, accounts department. That's a pretty specific question, Dave. If you can contact me directly, we'll talk about your specific situation. Please explain the mission versus vision and strategy versus strategic them. Mission captures the purpose of the organization. Vision captures your picture of the future. Where do you want to be at the future? Generally, they're too high. The vision often will have a high-level measurement tied to it, or an overarching strategic result that captures where do you want to be in 5 years. But usually, you break that down into strategic elements of some sort. For us, we call them strategic themes. Then you develop strategic objectives, and then those objectives have KPIs. So the KPIs are a little bit more granular, a little bit more detailed to help you understand what you're doing to achieve that high-level vision. Wow, there's so many questions. Very, very good. Very good. What if you have multiple agencies with all with multiple KPIs? Hopefully, if you have multiple agencies within, each agency if they're within a broader organization, then each individual agency would cascade off of that higher level organization. If that's not possible, in other words, if the various agencies are working more independent of each other, then you would develop your own strategy within each agency. And then within the agency, each unit or develop department within them would develop their own strategy and then develop their KPIs to match each individual agency and department strategy. What references do you recommend for us to read about formal methodology? Good question, Khalid. Obviously, that gives me a chance to plug our own book, The Institute Way. We wrote this came out in the summer of 2013. That's very balanced scorecard focused, but it does have a lot on the development of performance measures, on the development of KPIs, and then obviously we would recommend Stacey Barr's book, that on the pump methodology that came out earlier this year, I believe. Fantastic book for learning the methodology. Are we receiving the slides? There's a lot of questions about the recording and the slides. We don't share the slides, but we do share the recording. So this event is being recorded as I speak. As soon as we're done, we're going to process that and post it to our website. And so that will be available at any given point if you want to go back and watch it again, or if you want to share it with others. What level of organization is fundamentally responsible for developing KPIs? Leadership, management, directors, and professionals. Excellent question, Angela. We think of I think earlier I might have said that the strategy works its way down from top down. What I mean by that is conceptually. Conceptually, you develop strategy by articulating the high-level strategy and getting more and more granular. But in terms of the actual work, you would hope that you're all working together on this. High-level strategy is usually developed by the leadership team, but almost immediately when you shift into the measurement portion, you're bringing in subject matter experts. It's nice if there is a champion that can help organize the process and maybe do some of the teaching and help people with the terminology and things like that. So you might have a KPI champion or a strategy champion or a performance measurement champion who's facilitating. But I would hope that everybody you've listed, the management team, the directors, the professionals that are anybody who's in the middle of the work should be involved in the development of the strategy and then in the development of the KPIs. I mean, obviously not everybody is going to be a balanced scorecard or a KPI professional champion. But everybody should have some interest in being a better manager. Being a better manager is all about understanding where you stand now and making sure that you're making sure that you're making improvements to make things better. And you don't know whether you're actually getting better if you don't have some sort of measurement in place. How many people on a team to set up KPIs? Basically, we work with the executive teams that have 10 to 15 people on them usually that develop the strategy, and then when you actually get to the KPIs, those teams are typically smaller. So you'll have an objective owner and maybe 4 to 6 people on a team. Depending on the organization, depending on the KPI, what the focus area is. But generally, the owner of the KPI, the owner of the objective, will gather a small group of subject matter experts and discuss and implement each KPI. All right, there's a few more questions that are a lot more specific. If you want to contact me directly, or I'll look through the questions afterwards, and we'll, if we have a specific answer, we have questions about templates and examples and things like that. If I have some of those, I will send those out to individual people. I think we have everybody's email address on your registration. Again, don't forget that the recording will be made available on our website as soon as it's processed and posted. But on behalf of the Balanced Scorecard Institute, I want to thank you all for attending. I hope that you found some of the cheat sheet tips helpful, and I hope to see you all at a future KPI professional program. Thank you.